Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Last week has not been too eventful for a Care Bear like myself, but some pretty big updates did happen to EVE Online, of course, with the transition from the outposts to the faction citadels, which from what I've read on Reddit and the forums went quite smoothly. Everybody was pretty happy with how everything went down on that front. For the updates, there is actually something new that I just spotted on the updates website, is that next week we have a new agency event that's going to be completely different. It's going to be the Federation Grand Prix, and so we'll have an agency event that will actually ask us to go to different locations throughout New Eden in order to earn points. So very interesting, something completely different. Might be fun to try and go through that. Of course, there will always be pirates ready as well on some of the trickier locations, but we'll see what we can do with it. It sounds pretty interesting. And other than that, I must say we are again pretty light on the updates. We of course do have to absorb all the new stuff that's come in. But in Nullsec, for instance, all the wars for placement and for trying to grab all of the outposts, I think those are pretty much done, and I'm actually surprised by the amount of calmness that I'm feeling from Nullsec at the moment. There's always action there, but it's always relative as well. None of the major power blocks are making any major moves at the moment, as far as I'm aware. And then there's Into the Abyss, which is of course more solo-oriented content. That does have its risk as well. I hear that in Nullsec lots of people do hunt for the filaments, put down bubbles there, and thus try to pop you when you come out. And of course the higher tier filaments are somewhat more risky. I'm taking my time when it comes to abyssal content. I'm basically trying to find my balance when it comes to how many and when I want to play them. We'll see how that works out. But we're here for the market, of course, so let's get started on that. And as always, we are going to start with some plex and stuff at 220. Like that. Let's get started with the plex that have gone down a little bit more, 2,928,000 in Jita. If we go for the player on trade hubs, 2,860,000 is something like that, less than 2.9 million, and the buyers go down to 2.8 million pretty much. If you look at the chart here, we are at almost a 1 year low point if we disregard the very beginning of the chart here, and definitely like a little bit of a double bottom that has formed here. I think this is a great time to stock up on plex, especially if you want to use them for your account rather than paying real life money. This to me seems like a pretty good time to try to do so. A lot of this is also influenced by sales. I don't always get the mails, but this time I did get a mail that there is a sale going on yet again, so prices are still dropping a little bit. It's the May-June time as well, which has... I mean, I've been trying to trade in plex a little bit before. Since the monthly releases, the pattern has gone a little bit, but I still remember one very successful trade where I very purposely bought in May because I felt like a real bottom, and then I sold right before the winter expansion, made a lot of is that way. And so here I am seeing that pattern again. We are going down in price. A lot of it is driven by sales, so none of it I think are due to the fundamentals of the game or the economy or anything like that. This is a nice little opportunity to grab up some really cheap plex. We don't know anything about what CCP is planning after the summer towards the next winter. Will there be another expansion? Are we talking about the gates? What's going to happen there? Very interesting. Or it could be very interesting, and on a lot of hype there, we could really see another boom in plex prices. So you need that patience for the next hype in EVE Online, but this to me does seem like the right time to jump in on some plex purchases. Next up, let's take a look at the skill extractors, of course, also going down in price, under pressure because of plex. In fact, so far they are under the 330 million ISK for today. Let's take a look at the market. Yeah, 321 million pretty much for the sellers, 310 million for the buyers. Again, if we disregard the very early part of the chart, we are again heading for a 1 year low point here for the skill extractors. Now for the large skill injectors, finally that pressure is coming through as well. Definitely breaking away from the 800 million mark. Volumes are up a little bit as well here. 783 million for the sellers, 769 for the buyers. I'm here like a fan. I think we'll be okay. Definitely a lower price here as well for these large scale injectors. Again, if you have plans for these skill injectors, if you have any use for them yourself, or if you want them as a longer term investment, this to me seems like a nice opportunity to try and grab a few cheaper ones. It's all relative, of course. They're still costing almost 800 million ISK, but I still think that this little pushback here is a nice small opportunity. Next up, we have the small scale injector. Let's take a look at that one. Trying to hold the 160 to 170 million price band, but you can tell at the tail end here as well that the pressure is on. Currently selling for 161 million almost, and the buyers at 141. On the buyer side here, 20 million opening up, not so bad, 1/7 of the buyer price. So as a result here, potentially you can try to grab a couple of cheap small skill injectors as well if you want to. We forgot the multiple pilot training certificate on these sales. Of course, we are going back down again. So all of this is CCP driven, keep that in mind. But that does make for a very interesting chart if you manage to unload them. Volumes up a little bit. We're almost getting to 500 a day here. And then if we look at the bottom of 850 million, nice top here of 1.2 billion. That's definitely a trade you could make. And we are now dropping back down to 1 billion for the sellers, 945 million for the buyers. This, if you're looking at the longer term, to me is again a small buy opportunity, a gap, a margin of 55 million opening up between the buyers and the sellers. You can buy some multiple pilot training certificates for less than 1 billion right now. And then just if you look at the entire 1 year chart here, 1.3, 1.5 billion, we've been there before. It's always very difficult to unload at those prices. Granted, the volumes are pretty low, but with some patience on the upswing, I do think you can make a nice trade here once again if you buy them for less than 1 billion ISK. And then we have the daily alpha injector left that is now also feeling the pressure, going down to 50 million, bouncing off of that, but really 54 million for the sellers, 48.5 million for the buyers. Again, maybe a small opportunity. You can actually buy some daily alpha injectors for less than 50 million on the buyer side of things. To me, this is quite interesting. CCP is currently doing quite a few sales, having an impact on the market, and a lot of these in the extractor and the injector markets are lower than they've been for at least half a year or something like that. Same with plex here, definitely in a pretty good place. And I really actually like the multiple pilot training certificate. It is a much bigger investment to make, but I am a little bit surprised by the volatility of us going down. I would say if you have the ISK lying around, you might just want to buy, let's say, just one of them or two of them to try and get that trade going for less than 1 billion ISK and see how high you can sell them in the upcoming months and perhaps towards something like a next expansion or a winter release or something like that. Very interesting stuff. Definitely seeing opportunities there for the investors. Next up, we have the minerals. That's going to be at 840. Like that. As always, we'll start with titanium. Not good news on the titanium front. Increased volumes, prices going down. We went to less than 5 ISK. We actually are back above that in JITA itself, and we're still trying to hold on to 5 ISK on the seller side of things. Let's add the filter 503 for the sellers, 483 for the buyers. The buyers do have decided that they want to grab that titanium for less than 5 ISK, and who can blame them with still 1.3 billion coming in, 900 million here, another 1.2 billion, despite the fact that we are competing for prices closer and closer to 5 ISK. So the pressure is on, and to me this is another indication that it's a bit more quiet in nullsec than on average. There's not that much destruction, and so these stockpiles are starting to ramp up again, and as a result, of course, more people trying to sell more goods. While there is lower destruction, does mean that we should see lower prices. I think that's basically the impact that we're seeing here. It's still, in my opinion, okay, as long as you have the patience to try a sell order. If you're trying to unload some titanium, it's still 5 ISK, which is respectable. It's not great anymore. Once we go nicely above 5 ISK. We're in a pretty good price range here. It's still okay, but the pressure is on, and if we dip below 5 ISK, that's when I start to just hold off from selling any of my titanium personally. Next up, we have pyrites. Okay, went as low as 3 ISK here, 3 point something, so that is not good news. Did bounce off of that on increased volume, so we are talking some investments once people saw the opportunity to grab pyrite for less than 4 ISK. As a result, sellers are back at 413, buyers are at 381, but look at the response, 1.9 billion, 1.6 billion, 1.8 billion. It's just kind of crazy if you think about the fact that pyrite is usually coming in smaller volumes than titanium from its sources, and as a result, we're still seeing even higher volumes than titanium on the seller side of things. So it's really in the consumption department. I think that there's a complete imbalance at the moment, and as a result, pyrite is even cheaper than titanium. We're seeing higher volumes, and we are basically seeing 1 year low prices where we dip below 4 ISK. Some investors take the opportunity there. Considering the entire charts, it still feels risky. It's probably the right choice if, and that's a pretty big if, CCP does decide to somehow try to swing that market back a little bit. Next up, we have Mexalon. That's quite unfortunate as well, but to me is another indication that the factories in Nalsik, for instance, are not going full bore at this point. That is really the reason why Mexalon can command such a premium compared to all the other former high-SIC minerals here. It is because it's a bottleneck in Nalsik, but we can now see that we have to give even more ground. We're breaking through the 70 ISK mark on the chart without too much resistance, and we're heading very close to 65. It's 71.63 for the sellers, and the buyers are coming in at 67.75. Seems like there's maybe a little bit of resistance to go for less than 70 ISK on the sellers, which, considering the chart, I would say is pretty good news. Are we talking about player-owned trade hubs? No, I'm not seeing anything out of the ordinary there. So the only way that I can see the chart doing this with sellers still at 71.6 ISK is some very impatient people that have been selling directly to the buyers in pretty big volumes here. I think that is something that must have been happening in the last couple of days to have this kind of a chart, but we're still selling our Mexalon for more than 70 ISK. I'm actually a bit surprised by that, seeing this chart, but that is the case right now in JITA. So I would say it's still okay. We're still holding on, trying to hold on, just like with titanium, trying to hold on to that 5 ISK. Mexalon is trying to hold on to that 70 ISK. For how long, that's very difficult to say. Of course, with the last few sell orders still being 200 million, 73 million here, it is quite a lot of volume for the market to absorb. And if Nalsik remains decently quiet, if they don't need that much extra Mexalon to keep churning out their ships, then as a result we could easily break that 70 ISK mark, and that is going to be very dangerous. That is where we don't really have an okay price anymore for those two minerals, and then I would personally start to hoard my my minerals or compress my ore and try to sell at a better time. Next up, let's take a look at Isogen, and Isogen is now just meandering at that 1 year low point of less than 30 ISK. Really crazy situation as well. 28.27 for the sellers, 27.02 for the buyers. Isogen just basically structurally costing less than 30 ISK is something that's, I think, completely unseen in the game. This must be the lowest point ever, unless there has been some really weird anomaly at the beginning of the game that I never experienced. But since my time in EVE, which is approaching a decade, this has never been seen before. Really cheap, and despite that you still see 180 million coming here, another 90 million coming in here. So it's just basically overproduced quite massively, and again, 1 year low point. Where is the consumption? It just isn't there at the moment. Next up we have Noxium, that one falling back to another 1 year low point as well, breaking through the 300 ISK mark. This has been defended many times over the last half year. Here 1, 2, 3 times, another time here. This time we are through the 300 ISK. barrier. 297 for the sellers and 265.5 for the buyers. Super cheap. We still have some millions coming in, including 25 million units coming in for less than 300 ISK at just shy of 297. That is not good news, and it definitely confirms the vibe at the moment that we are mining way too much for the consumption, and I think that the problem lies with the lack of Tech 1 being in the meta at the moment. Next up here we have Zydrine, that's also dropping off. It's basically repeating its 1 year low point here. Let's take a look at the prices. 644 for the sellers, 612 for the buyers. And then over here we've got Megasite that's also dropping off to yet another 1 year low point, breaking through that 625 mark. Definitely not good news. 628 for the sellers, but 589 for the buyers. That is definitely quite low. Less than 600 ISK, easy purchase for Megasite, and it's definitely possible. That is pretty crazy. So the general vibe here for the minerals that are tied to Tech 1 production is that we are oversupplied quite massively at the moment. One thing to keep in mind, stuff like, where was it here, the Isogen and the Pyrite, where you see these investments being made from time to time. That is maybe the right thing to do, of course, for the longer term. Who knows, CCP might not be happy with this continuing. There are many ways to bring this back a little bit. There is perhaps more conflict in nullsec, but also trying to provide some meaningful content for Tech 1 ships. Things like that could all bring that back, and then this would be a very nice time, of course, to start to stock up on some of those minerals. When it comes to Morphite, the final mineral that we still have to check, it's holding above 9,000 ISK, so I think that this is still in a pretty good place. A very weird volume spike here that doesn't have any impact on the price. That is quite unusual, but Morphite is selling for 9,230 and the buyers are at 8,860 ISK. So definitely I would say a very respectable price for Morphite. Not too low, not too high. I would basically not be making a move considering where we are at the chart when it comes to Morphite. Next up, let's get started on our PI at 1715, let's say. There we go. And let's get started. Here are the broadcast nodes. After trying to bounce back to 2.25 million, we are back towards the lower strata of the chart for sure, below 2.1 million. Let's take a look at that. 2.139 million for the sellers, like right on the average, but 2 million for the buyers. Definitely a little bit below average, I would say. A small buy opportunity for cheap broadcast nodes right now. 2 million on the charts. It's definitely below everything, so not bad for that long-term investment. Looking forward to more structure information. This could actually be another nice time to purchase. Man, this is crazy. Plex time to purchase minerals. If you want to take, I feel like it's a little bit of a gamble, because who knows when or how CCP wants to, or even if CCP thinks that the very cheap Tech 1 ships are a problem. But definitely also at very low points, so you could see that as investment opportunity. And here now the advanced PI materials, tied to structures, might actually be in the right place as well. Broadcast nodes, I would say for sure, if you look at this entire chart. Next up, we have the construction blocks taking off. Okay, quite unexpectedly, but 13,500 ISK for the sellers and 12,400 for the buyers. Buyers probably around average, but sellers above average. Not bad. A sell opportunity for your construction blocks. Quite nice. Next up, you have the consumer electronics, basically very flat except for that one dip at the current price range, selling for 15,000 ISK, which is not bad considering the other refined PI materials. And buyers at 13,600. It's basically a very nice product that is pretty stable at the moment at a good price. Now we've got coolants. Quite interesting to see the comeback of coolants tied to fuels here, up to 10,000 ISK now. And are we above that? No, sellers are right on 10,000 ISK basically, but buyers are up to 9,600 ISK. This should have an impact on fuels, especially if this maintains for a while. This should mean higher fuel prices. It's quite interesting. Yeah, we should basically here, what I'm seeing here is we should have taken the gamble and stocked up at 8,000 ISK. And now you had a nice opportunity to already sell at 10,000 ISK. You know, a quarter the price, not bad. You could have made some ISK on that one. And it does show that no bottom prices, no 1 year low prices are forever. Although when it comes to the mineral market, it's been going on for quite a while. But keep this one in mind then. Coolants, everything was depressed, fuel consumption was depressed, the new structures were basically causing havoc with these prices, but here is the comeback. Nothing stays super low forever. Enriched uranium next, a little bit under pressure at the tail end here, but managed to claw its way back to 11,000 ISK here. Again, a bottom at 8,700 ISK. A little bit of a comeback, an early comeback you could say for enriched uranium, which is also tied to fuel consumption. And unfortunately, a little bit of pressure at the tail end, but still 11,100 for the sellers and 10,500 for the buyers. It's not that bad. Next up, I'm interested in the integrity response drones. They are trying to break 2.5 million. So I think it depends a little bit on the buyers. Yeah, 2.5 million for the sellers, buyers at 2.4 million. It's a little bit too early to call it a buy opportunity. I would love to see, you know, buy prices maybe closer to 2.3 million, something like that, to be really at the bottom end of the chart here. But it's already not so bad. You're buying them below 2.5 million ISK, and the sellers are definitely starting to go below that. You can also see the pressure here. The production is higher than the consumption. So maybe a little bit of patience can create a better opportunity for the integrity response drones. Although, especially if you're looking to use them yourself, we're definitely at a pretty good price range for that. Mechanical parts breaking out to 11,000 ISK. Look at that, another buy opportunity at less than 9,000 ISK, currently selling for 11,400. Buyers at 10,700. It's been a long time, but here we go. The PI market again showing that it is alive, that there is a lot of stuff happening in the PI market, and that here there are some trades, although we do need patience of several months, you know, a horizon of several months, I feel, in the PI market. But something that I can't really tell you exactly why. Why is fuel consumption going up? It must be for these prices to come back all of a sudden. But or maybe there is just inactivity in PI production or something like that, or people actually switching in droves from the cheaper mechanical parts to something like the much better selling consumer electronics. All of that is possible, but the price does come back. You could have bought these for 9,000 ISK. Now you're selling them for 11,400 ISK. Not bad at all. Definitely a nice little trade that could have been done. And something else that is going to, I think, put pressure for fuel prices to go up, actually. Nuclear reactors next, continuing on the lower end of the chart here. I'd call that last week we definitely spotted a buy opportunity. So nuclear reactors are selling for 90,000 ISK, and the buyers are coming in at 88,000 ISK. You know, you're just grabbing nuclear reactors for less than 90,000 ISK at this point. Look at the rest of the chart. 130, even 180 has been possible before. You need that patience. You can see that it often takes several months from the price to come from a low point to a high point, but it definitely happens. So if you then keep the coolant chart in mind, keep the mechanical parts chart in mind, nuclear reactors is looking like a pretty good place to try and grab some. Robotics next, holding at that 100,000 ISK mark, right on the average. Sellers 102,500, buyers 99,000 ISK. So we are right around that 100,000 ISK mark. It's a normal average price even before what you could call the low consumption time for fuel blocks. Again, robotics also tied to fuel blocks. So I think it did really well here, and you know, a little bit too early to say that you should sell or buy at this point. It's right on the average, but again showing that you know, nothing goes down into the abyss and doesn't come back. Self-harmonizing power cores, advanced PI, so tied to structures. Look at that, we're definitely again playing with the lower end. Are the buyers below 2 million? They are on 2 million ISK, sellers at 2.1 million. Again, not really the outspoken buy opportunity, but if you look at the entire chart, it's not that often that we're picking up self-harmonizing power cores for 2 million ISK, and on the introduction of a structure, we can easily go to 3 million or even higher. So 50% profit, I'd say that's not so bad. Another one to consider, or if you want patience, if you think that oversupply is gonna last a little bit longer, there might be a better buy opportunity on the horizon. However, we never know when CCP announces the next structure, and then it will have been too late. So that is of course the game of the market that you have to try to play. Next up, superconductors staying below 12,000 ISK. So 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. A bit of a lack of demand here on any more supply. If we dip back off, I can see a buy opportunity start to form. We just need to lose a couple more and we're starting to head in the 10,500 range. Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on as well. Test cultures next, holding at 10,000 ISK here, 9,900 for sellers and 9,300 for the first buyer. One thing to note here, one buyer 9,300, next one 9,000, next 8,900, next 8,700. That goes quite quickly, so you have to be careful for the test cultures. I would say if you're producing and selling that, try to do so now, because I can see the swing back quite quickly on increased supplies here. You can also see that the volumes are dying down, so I'd say that everything is primed to be oversupplied and to actually crash down. Be a bit careful. And next up we have the wetware mainframes. That's a nice drop off to less than 2.25 million. I would say 2.25 for the sellers, but 2.2 for the buyers. I would love for the gap to be a little bit bigger, but if you take a look at the entire chart, 2.2 million right here. Well, except for the very beginning of the chart, this is the lowest it's been in at least 10 months. So not bad. Advanced PI materials in an interesting spot in my opinion as well. Next up we have our, oops, and did I just make a mistake? Yes. There we go. Take one ships. Let's take a look at those at around 26.35. Like that. And I don't think it's gonna be good news. We saw all the minerals under pressure. We can see right here on the apocalypse the lack of demand for Tech 1 ships. People are asking to buy 23, 4, 5, 29, 32 apocalypses are being bought for a reasonable price. Well, that's also relative. 102 million, we have to consider that reasonable to get to any sort of a volume. Other than that, it's like just a dozen of them or so. So the pressure is on, and we are talking really cheap ships at the moment. 139 million for the first seller here of apocalypses, and it's 8 of them being brought to the market, 10 of them being brought to the market here. That is going to keep putting the pressure on. It just shows that Tech 1 ships are not in the meta right now. Next up we've got the Caracal. Try to get back above 9 million ISK, is being just slumped right back down on big volumes. So Caracal is a very popular PvP ship. What must have happened here on this 1 year low point, a bigger alliance kept an eye on the market, then grabbed everything up to a certain price point, and it's filled right away with fresh supply. You can see in the last 2-3 days all of this came back in from 9 million down to less than 9 million, buyers at 8.5. It's the Caracal, super popular, very good PvP ship, so there is a bit more demand to be spotted here, but the prices, 1 year low prices for less than 9 million ISK. The Catalyst next has been under pressure for several months as well. We've got a bit of a volume spike here as well on the lower prices. They're selling now for 1.1 million, buyers coming in at 1 million. Lots of supply, buyers, well, it's the Catalyst, it's a ganking ship, so there will be people trying to grab quite a few of those, but it's not even that big. Next up we've got the Drake. Look at that, 45 million bouncing right down to 40 million. That must be, in my opinion, you can see all of this fresh supply in the last 24 hours and in the last couple of hours going from 45, last couple of days, sorry, going from 45 to 42 million. Buyers are at 39 million. It can't really browse in there, so it's maybe a bit over 100 Drakes that are being bought, and lower mineral prices, you can make cheaper drakes. People are bringing those to the market. They're crashing down the price. And there is not enough demand to command anything else. Ferox, one year low point is where we are hovering around at the moment, selling for 42 million. And there are some buyers of Feroxes, but 36.5 million for a Tech 1 battle cruiser, definitely on the cheap side. Megatron next, a little bit of a bounce off after we broke through 140 million ISK, 147 for the sellers, 135 for the buyers. Again, look at the buy orders here, 2, 3, 1 buy order of 10, that's really it. We're talking maybe 20 again on all the buy orders total. The Oracle continuing to meander at the lower end of the chart for sure, selling for 67 million, buyers at 61. Again, you can see the lack of demand is pretty obvious. Then we've got the Raven going down from 150 million, having to give back ground, playing with 140 at the moment, 142 for the sellers, 130 for the buyers, and yeah, pretty wide gap. Some more buyers. The Raven is a very nice platform, but it's not really helping. 140 for a battleship is very cheap. Then we've got the Retriever going down to, let's take a look at that, 19 million, pretty much on the chart. Going back up towards 20 million here. We are coming from a 1 year low point, so it's 21 for the sellers, 18 million for the buyers. They're not even following, and it's a little bit of an increased volume. After we reached the 1 year low point, that increased the price here. Won't last too long, I don't think. Although supplies, well, some are coming in the last 24 hours, and it's immediately 50 ships. Next up, we've got the Tempests. Also, you know, did really well after arms race event, came back to 160 million. Tried to hold on there, but look at the two-step down here, breaking 140 million. It's now 139.9 for the sellers, 128.4 for the buyers. So this again is showing that the problem lies with the demand. Next up, we've got the Thrashers, definitely below average again as well, selling for less than a million ISK, buyers at 800,000. Then we have the Tornado. Also, again, playing with that 1 year low point, going for less than 60 million ISK, sellers at 59.5, buyers at 55 million. We've got the Tristan that is staying below 500,000 ISK. In fact, at the tail end is still going even lower. Yeah, 480 for the sellers, 436 for the buyers. Time for some cheap Tristans if you want. Then we've got the Venture, that is the one Tech 1 ship that managed to hold on to like higher prices for the entire year. Went up to 300,000 ISK. 272 for the sellers, 245 for the buyers. Definitely the one outlier. Could be alpha related, maybe. Considering that if you want to mine as an alpha clone, that's really your only option. And then finally we've got the Vexor also dipping to that 1 year low point of 9 million ISK, less than that for the first sellers, 8.2 million for the buyers. Yeah, Tech 1, it's just really cheap, but I would not call this a buy opportunity, unfortunately. Maybe again, long term, something changes. CCP can somehow incentivize some usage and especially destruction of Tech 1 ships. We might see a comeback of that, but there are already places, I think, to invest in with less risk, I would say, such as the minerals, of course, who could also go up on a big Nosec war, for instance, that I would not risk making purchases in Tech 1 personally. Next up, let's take a look at the Tech 2 market. That is going to be at 32.50. Like that, and let's go take a look. The Ares giving back a little bit of ground here after going up to 33 million almost, but staying above 30 million, so I don't really like that too much. 31 for the sellers, 27.5 for the buyers. I would love to see us go a little bit lower. Still, one thing to keep in mind, 27.5 is definitely the lower end as well. So it's basically a pretty wide margin that has opened up here between sellers and buyers, which is difficult to trade on, I think. Although if for instance you know about Nosec, if you know that there is some action brewing, if you know that there are some interceptor fleets that might die, then this is still a buy opportunity, of course, considering the chart for the last half year or so. Cerberus, you know, volatile, but at the very high end here. dropping back down to less than 300 million. Yeah, 293 for the sellers, 268 for the buyers. There are some trades to be made here, right? 270 to 340 million ISK. It's all tied to events, but you can also see that we are at the very high end of the chart here, so it's all quite risky as well. Next up here, we've got the claw, also slowly, coming back down a little bit, but staying above 30 million. Buyers are at 29.5, so I definitely don't like this one. The crow is dropping after reaching a high point of almost 38 million, is giving back ground. If we look at the bottoms, 27.5. It's 33 for the sellers, 31 for the buyers. Again, that's unfortunately a no. We had a nice sell opportunity last week. Let's just call it that. The Crusader staying too high as well, in my opinion. 33.3 for the sellers. There's now 621 of them coming in. This might finally dip the price back down, but with a substantial amount of buyers at 30 million. I think it's still going to take some time for a buy opportunity to form. The Heretic flat at 80 million. I mean, I can't really see any opportunities right there. The Hound, though, that is interesting, breaking through 30 million at the chart, actually heading close to 25 million on the chart. 30 million for the sellers, but 25.3 for the buyers. Considering this entire chart, I would say that the Hound is in buy order territory right now. You can definitely try to grab some cheap Hounds. The Ishtar next, after bouncing up to 400 million ISK, must be the abyss here, considering these higher volumes, is dropping back 314 million for the sellers, 271 for the buyers. Still pretty high though. Manticore, stealth bomber, dropping straight through the 35 million mark, trying to land at 30. Where are the buyers at? 31 million. Again, a little bit too high for my tastes. I can't really spot the buy opportunity here. The Hound, sure, that one does look good. Nemesis, unfortunate again, some volatility, bouncing off that 30 million mark instead of going even lower. Buyers at 29, sellers at 32. Again, nope, not for me. We've got the Pontifex that is slowly going down to 75 million, which seems to be its average. It's 83 for the sellers, 81 for the first buyer here. So it's still really, really expensive trying to get to that 75 million mark. And even then, it's not even a low point in the last 6 months or anything like that. The Purifier next, 35 million, slowly going down. But again, buyers 29.5, sellers 33.6. No, right in between the lows and the highs. So can't say I would make a move on that. Raptor, same thing, slowly heading for less than 35 million, but it's 35 for the sellers, 28 for the buyers. Is that a buy opportunity? 28 for the buyers, maybe, but very tricky, I think. The Saber, flat 70 to 80 million, increased volumes, 74. Yeah, maybe some more supply coming in here, keeping the price from reaching 80 million again. But not something I would trade in. The Stiletto, lovely double spike up to 40 million. It's quite unfortunate that the bottoms are staying at 30 and the buyers are at 29. If you're feeling really risky, you can try to grab a couple of Stilettos at 29 million and hope for another one of these spikes, but it's really risky in my book. Then we've got the Stork. I'd say again 90 to 100 million ISK, just staying at that high end. I don't like it. And then finally we've got the Taranis again staying well above 30 million ISK. The only one that's interesting in my book is the Hound, that clearly breaks with the rest of the chart. Is at a not a 1 year low point, but definitely a 6 month low point since the introduction of the moon mining changes and these higher prices. So here, that is my one opportunity that I'm spotting in the Tech 2 market. It's the Hound. It's a very tricky one. In my opinion, still to try and understand, to try and make active trades in. And I personally would prefer basically the no-brain trades, the one where you're like 99% sure that you're gonna make some money on. And here it would be the Hound. If you can grab these for less than 26 million, on any spike, and it does happen with stealth bombers, you are going to make some ISK. Next up, the Tech 3 ships. That's going to be at 38, 35. Like that. As always, we'll start with the destroyers. The vibe last week was for the destroyers still pretty cheap, but not crazily oversupplied. So here is the Confessor still pretty cheap, staying below 40 million ISK. Supply-wise, well, there's a bit more coming in here, 37 million for the sellers and 34.5 for the buyers, 64 and 40. If you look at this entire 1-year chart, you can still try to grab a couple of buy orders, I think, if you haven't done so just yet. But the supply here is not completely crazy. It's not the hundreds and hundreds of ships in a single sell order that are driving the price down to like really low levels. So it's still at the lower end. There is plenty of supply. It's nothing too crazy, at least here in the Confessor. The Hecate bounced up above 40 million ISK, and as a result there is a bit more supply. But again, look at the volumes here at 42.5 million for the sellers, 32, 50, 32, 22. Nothing too crazy, nothing out of the ordinary that risks crashing the price down. So the Hecate is affordable, decently supplied, nothing too crazy. Next up here we get the Jackdaw that tried to go up to 50 million, is back at 37.5 million on the chart, 38 for the sellers, 35 for the buyers. Not that many buyers for Jackdaws, that's a bit surprising. So 35 million feels quite okay if you want to make that investment. Again, don't go crazy in the volumes, but looks quite okay to try. And then here 16, 12, 10, 13 as the biggest sell orders. Nothing too crazy either, so I would say this is looking alright. Unfortunately, this does go either way. On nullsec action, on a loss of several fleets, we could see higher prices because the supplies just aren't there. We could see higher prices all of a sudden, but on more stability, we could also see increased volumes, oversupply, and we could go to another leg down. So it's in between the two here. Same with the Svepel, staying below 40 million, quite flat at the moment. Here we've got a bit more supply, 333, 120 at 36 million. So the action is just below that. And this is the one that does have a lot more ships on the market. It's also really cheap at 33 million. That means that you are picking up some Svepels at a very cheap price at the moment, but you are dependent on some actual destruction in order to make some ISK on that trade. And this one also shows that the potential oversupply might be there as well. So it's a risky proposition, but I would say only if you go all in. As long as you take advantage of these prices and you buy maybe 1-2 Confessors at the time for less than 35 million. Okay, managed to do that, great. Let's wait for those to bounce back. Same with the Jackdaw. The lack of demand here is quite obvious, so that's also, in my opinion, a small opportunity to grab a couple of them, as long as you don't put an order of 100 Jackdaws trying to make billions of ISK on a single trade. I think you're still okay to try and risk that. Next up, we've got the cruisers, and those, in my opinion, have been manipulated in the last couple of months. And here now we have the Legion dropping off a little bit to 174 on supplies, 1-2. So again, nothing massive in the volumes. 136 for the buyers. That's a pretty wide gap. And on these types of volatilities, these types of crazy things, I do think there are opportunities to be found, but they are very risky. Timing is everything. It's going to be difficult to do so. These buyers at 136, look at the entire chart, 136 right here. Is that an opportunity? Maybe it is. These volumes are nothing too major, so a Legion fleet gone, you need to replace that right away. Hello, prices back to 190 or something like that. So this is really a difficult market to understand. I think because a spike like this is, in my opinion, manipulation. The volumes are also small enough that they can be manipulated, but these really low buy orders could create an opportunity for you. Next up here we get the Loki, same thing, right? Went up to 350 million ISK, in my opinion, completely unnatural. Goes back down to 200 million ISK. The buyers are at 190, sellers at 201. The gap has closed. The volumes are not that big. Is that a buy opportunity for the Loki? I'd say not as pronounced as the Legion, but perhaps it is. Next up here we got the Proteus. Again, went up to 200 million ISK. Look at the volumes, they're just too small. So you would consider increased volumes to get a price to go from 140 to 200 million. That didn't happen. It's just small enough that you can do it this way if you have the ISK. And then we are now back down to 150, 159 for the sellers, 143 for the buyers. The Legions are being bought for less than the Protei. that's something to keep in mind. I'd say the Legion buy orders look quite interesting. If we look at the rest of them, and here is the Tengu, same thing. Look at that, just sharp up to 250. That's basically been a relisting, I think, going back down to a more normal price, 172 for the sellers, 160 for the buyers. This does put that Legion gap into an interesting light, in my opinion. If I'd have to take to put up some buy orders in Tech 3s, I'd put up a couple of Legions, and I'd honestly put up a couple of Jackdaws because of the lack of interest here on the buyer side of things. Maybe a couple of Zwepels as well, because they're like less than 35 million, something like that. Yeah, interesting Tech 3 markets this week, I would say, but again, could go either way, I think. And then finally, we've got the extra product at 445. Yeah, all right. And of course, we have to take a look at the new ships for that. So let's go take a look at the Triglavian ships. Can we just find them in a category or something like that? Let's start with the frigate. And then we have precursor frigates, Triglavian, the Damavik. Starting out, first data point at 1.5 billion ISK. There are now more Damaviks on the market, going for 375 million ISK for the sellers, 325 for the buyers. Still very expensive, of course, for a frigate. But also in the affordable range. If you just want one right now, I think that you can try to do that. And of course, I think that we will see this keep going down and down as more people learn the Abyss, run the Abyss, and also eventually might even master the Abyss, although I'm not sure how they're going to handle some of the spawns in tier 4 and tier 5. Let's take a look at the cruiser next, which for me, I think is a very interesting cruiser also for PvE. Starts at 5 billion on the very first introduction. It's now selling for 821 million ISK, bars at 680, also dropping quite fast. Of course, you can see that the page goes from almost a billion to 120, so that does go quite quickly. A little bit too expensive in my book for a cruiser, but definitely going down in price quite rapidly. I have the skill myself. I do still need the frigate skill in order to get started on the training. Maybe we should take a look at that, in fact, those skill books as well. We'll do that. So we'll switch back to the Triglavian frigate. If we do then show info requirements, we have precursor frigates, and we can do view market details. Selling for 185 million ISK. A drop of a skill book is not a bad drop right now in the Abyss. You know, grab a couple of those, bring them to the market, earn back your lost cruiser, like my Sacrilege. Could be good. I still need that one myself. I have patience when it comes to that, so I'm not going to purchase it. But yeah, 185 for the frigate skill. So next up we had the cruiser. Let's do the same here. Take a look at the requirements. I actually have that one, and it's precursor cruiser. Few market details. Selling for 56 million ISK. Apparently a more common drop here. That is already quite affordable. If you want that right now, just want to get that out of the way, spend 50 million, grab it, and be done with it. So that's quite interesting. The bottleneck skill of the frigates, which I also don't have. I have the cruiser and I have the battleship, is still costing more. And then finally we have the precursor battleship. Here is the Leshak, selling for 1.8 billion ISK. Early sales at 5.3 billion ISK. That's pretty damn crazy. Still super expensive, of course. The supply just isn't there just yet. It also costs a lot more material, so it's normal that this takes more time to get going. But I am curious about the skill. So we get precursor battleship. 18 million ISK, not even that expensive at all. So I think also we can expect the frigate skill book to really drop off towards this range as well, becoming super affordable eventually. I have the patience for that. I think that the cruiser is a very interesting platform for PvE, to be honest, because it's got this crazy layouts. If you look at fitting, with 6 low slots, 4 medium slots, 4 high slots, 3 utilities. One of these, it also has drones, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 75 cubic meters and 50 cubic meters. So you've got the small drones, you've got the medium drones, you've got the weapon system, you've got the low slots. to do a lot with that. I personally do look forward to actually grabbing a Vidmag for PvE. First of all, I think seeing what kind of an exploration ship I can make out of that, but then maybe as my Abyssal Runner, I think all of those low slots can make this better than the Sacrilege, because you've got this weapon system that I think will up your DPS far more. You get the same drone capacity. So to me, this is very, very interesting ship for PvE actually, that I do look forward to trying to grab. But I still need to do some more Abyssal content before I can get started on that. For now, that's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.